All right, hello. Let's talk about React. So, what are we expecting of you in React? Let's pull it up. Okay, building component hierarchies, manipulating state, implementing controlled forms, integrating APIs, and discussing common topics relating to React. All right, so by the end of the next 2 weeks, you should be okay at this. Let's talk about what that looks like. So first tool you're going to get used to, you may have installed it already, it's called Create React App. And to talk about it, I need to pour a Diet Coke because it depresses me. Create React App is a CLI tool. All of the front-end frameworks have them at this point. Vue's got one, Angular has one, and they all came from Ember CLI. In fact, Angular's is a fork of Ember CLI. Ember CLI was inspired by the Rails commands. So you could scaffold, you could generate, you could, all of those kinds of things. You'd Ember S and like your app loads up. Pretty badass. Create React App? Well, why not just show you? Create React App, and we'll call this mod for overview. All right, and it does all the things. Hi, Carl. I hope that's Carl. And then we wait. I don't know what SIL is. I really hope it's short for silly. Wow, somehow this has gotten slower. I didn't think that was possible. This NPM fund thing is kind of an interesting addition to the web. So open source projects that like want funding to keep maintaining them, you type NPM fund and give them money. That's a great idea. All right, cool. So it's installed. If I go over to mod for overview, oops. Cool, I got, oops, not that. I got some node modules. I got like an HTML file. I got some like, a couple like fake React things and README. And that's it. It's all Create React App does. There's no generators, there's no anything else. That's kind of all of it. So, and we call this progress. So, let's take a look at what we just got. If I npm start this, why yes I would. Oop, except not in my Cypress browser, please. Ta-da! We have a React app. I can even make it say other things. So I think I'm gonna, let's see, source, app.js, learn React, or don't. Do whatever you want. I'm not a cop. And there we go. All right, making React apps. So let's zoom back out and talk about what components are. So React is a component library. The best description I've ever heard for what a component is a custom element. So if you think of like an input tag is a great example. So we have this thing, it looks a certain way. You can type characters into it. So you could say that the element has state because it has a blank state, there's nothing in it. There's these three characters. There's a combination of these things. We call these the state of the element. React elements can have those too. You could also say that, can you tell I'm drawing on an incline? That this form that's around it, that also like kind of has some custom behavior. If I hit enter while I'm in here, this thing submits. It has behavior, right? So what React allows us to do is make those however we want. Anything you can imagine. The entire app is a component, and every little part inside of it also a component. So we build these hierarchies that are fundamentally custom elements. Ask me some questions about that concept. Custom elements. Imagine you're doing this like Legos. So this is your app. Instead of building everything all out from scratch, I put in an app heading, or header, this would be better for that. And then under that is an app body. And inside of that is logo. Inside of that is a sign up form. That's React. And more broadly, this is every like modern JavaScript framework. React kind of works this way. Vue, sort of the same thing. Ember, Angular, they're all like based around this idea. How they implement them and what extra cool things they give you on top of that varies substantially. But this core idea is basically how every JavaScript app is made in 2020. Again, I implore you, ask me some questions about this. Yep. That wasn't a question.
So, I guess what I'm asking is, are you writing code like you're writing HTML? Is that kind of how this is going?
Yep.
All right.
It's a big part of it. So in React, we have a thing called JSX, which is HTML in JavaScript. And it looks like this. See how this is a function and it's returning something, but the thing that it's returning looks like HTML. That's JSX. we get some other cool shit. Like we can display variables inside of it.
Which is like what you're importing from a different file.
Yep. This is an SVG. Just importing it and throwing it there.
Is that how you make the dynamic logo?
Yep. So you'd have a variable. Probably wouldn't just be an import like this. You have a, you keep track of it in your React app. It's bound to this, and then every time this changes, this changes. Other questions about building apps with Legos so far?
Is the styling still done separately, or do you like
That's a more controversial question than you might think, but the way that it's done here, which is probably how I'd recommend that you do it, is you have a component called app, you make a CSS file called app, and you import it. And another thing that's popular with that is like, all right, so we give this class name app, and then everything kind of lives nested inside of that. Yep.
So along the same lines, in my previous project, I would set something in CSS, and then at a certain point, I would, in the JavaScript, change that CSS to something else. You can do the same thing here and there.
Oh, Miriam, your life is about to get so much easier. There's a lot of like gymnastics that you have to do with Vanilla.js that you just don't when you're using a framework like this. And things like dynamically applying classes, much, much easier. All right, so let's make a little bit of React. So don't follow along with this, just watch. But the first thing that I do, and I'm working with a new React app, is I delete pretty much all the boilerplate. All the stuff that it gives you as like examples, like you don't need them. So I'm gonna get rid of that and that. This I need, but I don't need all of it. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that and that and that. And cool. So our bare bones React app looks like this. This index.js file, which is, we call this the bootstrapper. All this does is like start up your React app. You have an empty CSS file and the most naked React app possible. A component called app where all it does is return an empty div. I can just write some HTML in here. Ta-da! So let's make it do a little bit more than that. One of the first things that you're going to have to get used to in React, and like this will probably not be this way in a year or two, but it is today, so buckle up. Going back and forth between a component that looks like a function and a component that looks like a class. You may or may not have done much class stuff in Mod 3. If you didn't, it's because I hate them. It's like one of the most poorly implemented things in JavaScript. But going back and forth between these, that's kind of our bread and butter in React for right now. So it works just like it did in Ruby. Use the class keyword, say app, you say extends instead of the little shovel, and we want to extend react.component, and then we make a method called render. Let me put that inside of it. Still works, same thing, that, same shit. Get very used to just turning those inside and out because you have to go back and forth kind of a lot. The reason is, with that function style, like that, I'm fairly limited in what I can actually do with the component. If all I'm doing is something like this, just making an HTML element, making it show up, easy, make it a function. If it has to do anything more than that, it's probably a class. So for example, I'll have state heading text and now I can make this this.state.heading text. Magic. And I can even make buttons and stuff that will change that. So I can make a button over here. Anybody have, I've been reading my children Alice in Wonderland a lot. So we can say, all right, when this gets clicked, we could say update heading text. This.update heading text. So it's going to call a method that I throw on this class when I do that. So I might say update heading text. I can say this.setState heading text. I told you not to do that. Oops. Come on, man. Caps lock, cruise control for awesome. All right, and then when I click on that, it breaks. Come on, man. It's a weekend for all of us. Oh, I see why. Wait, that should have worked. Oh, nope. Like that. Oop. Because I wrote that like a human. Needs to be a fat arrow. There we go. So like, that's like kind of components in a nutshell. So we can do all sorts of dynamic stuff. And if we look back over at what was happening over here, this just looks like an element named app. I could even do something like, let's say I want to make that heading a component. I'm going to call that component heading. So I'm going to say touch source heading.js, and then I'm going to copy all of this over. This one, I'm going to make a function called heading, and it's going to take in props. Your first thing you got to figure out in React is building component hierarchies. Props are part of that. Render goes away. This is the return value. So now I have a component called heading that's expecting to be given its text. To use that, import heading from heading. And now I can use that just like an element. And if I want to give it that text, I can say heading text equals this.state.heading text. Still works. Even like when I change it, still passes it down. custom elements. So that is building component hierarchies, that is manipulating state in component hierarchies. Let's talk about these last two, and that'll kind of get you through the code challenge. Let's say I need to make a this balloons API that I just made for the Mod 2 overview. I want to make all those balloons show up in my app. There is a little bit of magic built in to React. So we can say, all right, whenever this component shows up, I want to fetch localhost 3000 balloons. I want to parse the response. I want to take the balloons that I get back and make them all show up in the page. So what I'm going to do, it's a little bit different than we did in JavaScript. I'm going to say this is get balloons. Then over here, I'm going to keep track of what balloons that I have. I start with no balloons, and then when I get some balloons back, this dot set state with whatever balloons that I got. And then to make those show up on the page, get balloons. I will say this dot state dot balloons. I'm going to map over them. I'm going to turn each balloon that I have into, wait for it, a JSX element. So I'm going to return P balloon.color. It's kind of like I can just mix and match JavaScript and HTML. It's a big React idea. If I did that correctly, response on line 16. Response. Cool. I've got the balloons from my API showing up on the page. So we have integrated APIs into React applications. Also, I can pass those balloons into components. I can make a balloon component and pass each one of those in. Whatever. Controlled forms, last thing. So I do have a create endpoint for that also. So maybe I make another thing called create balloon. And create balloon is going to fetch the same endpoint. Method is post headers content type application JSON, and as body we will JSON.stringify a balloon. A balloon is going to be this dot state dot balloon. So over here, we can keep track of this. This is one part of our balloon equation. Whatever that's set to, I want you to send it to this API. And then I want you to take the response and I want you to add that balloon to state. So balloons will be this dot state dot balloons, and then whatever the thing I just got back was. And cool, should be good to go. One last thing. Since they're in mod 2 and they don't know how to do event listeners or anything like that, there was a thing that this. You need to actually save that and send it back instead of redirecting them. So render JSON balloon. Neat. I wonder if it works. Oops. We're doing forms. I gotta add the fucking form. So form input type text, and then on submit, I want it to call create balloon. Yeah. On submit this dot create balloon. And then this is this is probably the gnarliest thing in mod 4 is like all the way understanding this. On change, whenever this input updates, calling this dot update color. So we make an update color and every time somebody types in there, we change the state of that balloon. We'll say balloon color is event.target.value. It has a submit button. Input, type, submit, value, add color. Cool, so now I have this form, turquoise. Oop, something didn't work. Ah, anybody catch what I did? Prevent default. You got it, you know, you'll be fine. Prevent default. Cool. Green. Cool, hey, and there it is. Turquoise. LMNOP. And you see how fucking fast that feels? My son would say, yayo. So when you're using Gmail and you're clicking through tabs and the page is changing, but not really, feels so quick and app-like, it's stuff like this. So that is what is referred to as a controlled form in React. All the things that I just showed you are what you should be able to do in 2 weeks. There's one other thing that you need to do in the code challenge, but otherwise that's kind of it. 2 weeks, we got this, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Ask me some questions. So, if you didn't do this in Mod 3, this is the JavaScript class syntax. So this is not a function body. You can't just do regular JavaScripty kinds of things. There's a couple of things that we can do. Almost all of them that you'll be up to are setting things equal to other things. But you notice there's no commas here. It's not an object either. It's its own syntax. But we can say that if I were to write the same thing in Ruby, it would be like that. Same kind of shit. It's an instance variable. And we can also write these as methods. If you want to not hate your life for the next 2 weeks, I get used to always writing these with like this fat arrow syntax instead of what you might be more used to, which would be either this, which is valid JavaScript. This is called method shorthand. It's probably closer to like what it would feel like in Ruby. That is a road to heartache. Or something like this, which also might feel a little bit more familiar. All three of these are valid ways to like make a method on a class, and React just do this one. And the reason why has to do with this, which is cryptic horseshit in JavaScript. And if you want it to work the way that self does in Ruby, always use the fat arrows like that. Same thing. Parameter 1, parameter 2, like that. If you're only doing one of them, you don't need the parentheses. So you can do it like that, but you still can do parentheses. And if you're doing nothing, you have to have the parentheses, like that. Yep, Miriam.
Is it that arrow bind that method to your
Not quite. What it does is it keeps the context that it was called in. By the way, if the thing I'm about to say is like hurting your head, don't worry about it. The context inside of this render function is the instance of the class. That's why I can call this update heading text, and it knows that I'm talking about that instance. If I use the fat arrow, when I use this here, it's still referring to that same context. And this is where this thing breaks if you don't start using the fat arrows. Let's say I call get balloons or something in here. All right, well that uses this also. If I don't use the fat arrow, this becomes this function context. It is the most broken thing in JavaScript, like almost universally agreed. And this just goes back to how it was designed in 1995, and they didn't realize that we were going to be using it for all this. People thought it wasn't that big a deal. But it doesn't work the same way that self does in Ruby, and it doesn't work the same way that this does in any other language. It's just every language has like quirks and rat's nests and there be dragons. This is JavaScript's. Use fat arrows, it'll work kind of the way you think. Yeah, Sam. Nope. Well, it's all auto-generated. You probably want to change the title so it's something more meaningful. But otherwise, all this thing is for is mounting your React app. So that div is where everything will eventually go. And hey, what do you know? Get element by ID root. That's that element that we saw. And mount this component on it. Yeah, Miriam.
Can you write your epic JS?
Cool.
So, to my understanding, React App component
So if I use this syntax, I gotta do it this way. The thing you're talking about is, so React is everything. I'm bringing in the entire React library. It has a property called component, which is a class, which is why I can extend it. You're talking about is in addition to bringing everything in, I can also destructure out component and do it this way. It's the exact same thing. And I actually prefer this syntax, but if line 1 is hurting your head, the other way works just fine too. They're the same thing. Cool, what else?
You added in the rendering state, is it rendering the entire array of voters, or is it only rendering what was just added?
So this is like React magic under the hood. Conceptually, imagine it re-rendering everything. So this render function, an okay mental model for you right now would be that this function gets called every time anything inside of this changes. It just re-renders the entire thing. Now, the truth is, React has a little bit of math under the hood to make it so that it doesn't actually have to re-render everything. In fact, this was like kind of React's offering to the JavaScript world. It figured out a really sharp way to do that called DOM diffing. And every other framework immediately went, oh yeah, that's how we should have been doing this, huh? And all of them switched over to it. It turns out that this DOM tree starts with document, and it has a child called HTML, and it has a child called head and body, and this maybe has header and main, and this has h1 and nav. Okay, so that's a DOM tree. It turns out that doing any operation on this tree is the slowest thing on the web, other than network requests. If I am changing the text on this, if I'm taking out this and adding something else to it, it's really expensive. So, especially if you have to do all of it. If we were actually re-rendering the entire app, yank all of this out, put a whole new tree in, slow, 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 slow. If you have something where that's happening a couple hundred times a second, it becomes very obvious that like, it just app feels laggy. So, what's not slow is if I take a JavaScript version of that and kind of represent it like an object. And all the way down. And I can create that with whatever my state was. I can create it with whatever my state is about to be, and then subtract it. So I just see what's different and only make that change. So this thing, these two different versions of it, what it was, what it's about to be, that just happens in JavaScript. We can do that whip fast and just figure out what the actual change is. And then when we actually change the DOM tree, we're doing as little as possible, and the expensive calculation was done where it could be done quickly. It's called the virtual DOM. And React figured it out, now everybody does it. Because they were just right. What else? Ooh. All right, Carl. Can classes inherit from more than one class? No, they can't. And that's the case in most languages. Not every language, but most languages, you can only inherit from one class. Anybody know how you would achieve a similar result to inheriting from more than one class? That's not how you do it. There was a way to do it in Ruby also. Because Ruby has what's called single inheritance, so you also only have to inherit from one thing. But you can bring in a mix-in, is what a mix-in is. So I can say I would also like to have all of the state and behavior from this other class available to me. I want you to mix it into this. So it's not a hierarchy. We call this composition instead of inheritance. So the difference would be if inheritance is everything has this, it has these children that are inheriting from it, and this thing inherits from this, which inherits from this. That's single inheritance. I could also say that this thing here gets all of the pieces of this and all of the pieces of this. I'm composing it out of this. Inheritance is top down, composition is bottom up. Another metaphor. So one of the biggest gripes about inheritance is all I wanted was a banana, and I got the banana, the monkey, and the whole goddamn jungle. Because it has everything from that inheritance tree. So the other way you could do that is, all right, a banana is something that is peelable, so I'll take the peelable classes and mix them in. It's edible, so I'm going to take the edible classes and mix them in. I'm going to take the yellow fruit class and mix that in. Those three things together equals a banana. So I've built it from the ground up. That's composition. The guy who invented Java, James Gosling, was once asked what his biggest regret about Java was, and he said inheritance. Inheritance, while being a pillar of OOP, is the least popular part of it. It's almost always a bad idea. And there's an exercise I've done with students before where I give you an animal, you make the class. And I give you another animal, and you need to extract the things that are in common into a shared class. And I give you another one. Okay, well, now I need to move the hierarchy around a little bit. And that keeps working until you get to like weird animals that have a little bit from this and a little bit from this. And your hierarchy falls apart completely. And that you could probably generate one from the beginning that works for that. The odds you'll be able to do that as you progressively understand the problem more are zero. You'll get it wrong every fucking time. So composition saves you from that by letting you just build something out of different pieces that don't have to have any other relationship with each other. And it's way more durable for like when you gradually understand a problem and has essentially no downsides. So there you go. That's my long answer to your simple question. What else? Mm-hmm. I can call it on this class. Okay. And this is another like intellectually tricky thing. Let's say I wanted to put this button in the heading also. So I put that over here. All right, these are both here now. The problem is there is no this.update heading text. That existed on the other thing. Okay. So I take update heading text and I move it over there. Easy. Uh-oh. Problem is there is no state for heading text on there. Okay. So what happens is, actually, I'm going to put that back and show you how you'd actually do this. So I need some way, because I'm still getting past this, I still need something like the ability to update that state. So what you do is you pass this function in as a prop. This becomes props.update heading text. And now when I'm rendering that heading, I can have update heading text equals this dot update heading text. Well, let's see if it works. Drink me. It works. So the flow on that, I have this component here. It gets passed two props. One of them is a string. The other one is a function. The heading component doesn't know what that function does. Doesn't matter. It's just a function that it can call. And what's cool about it is that function can see things that that heading component can't. That's really what this entire second standard is all about, is getting more comfortable with that. Passing around functions like their regular values, that's another brain bender in Mod 4. Cool. Anything else? So, for some reason, students fucking hate the labs in Mod 4. I've never been able to figure out why, because they're honestly not bad. That's how I learned React. That's how like most of the staff learned React. They're fine. It's a completely appropriate way to learn React, and like IMO, I think there's some of the better labs in the program, but for whatever reason, people get mad at them very early on and then like don't do them. And then get confused about things that are explained in the labs. So I'd recommend like stick with the labs. They're okay. And so that's what I'd recommend you do for the rest of the day. Anything else? Go and be well.